Putin and Xi and the Ayatollah, call them all out. And it got me sanctioned, as you know, for the privilege, but I think it's important. Well, I'm sanctioned by Russia, I'm sanctioned by China, I'm sanctioned by Iran, I'm working on North Korea, I'm working on Venezuela. And then, of course, I was in cabinet. I was in charge of our security, and you'll understand there's a lot I'm not going to tell you about that.
Yes, I'll ask you.
You're welcome to ask, but I promised to keep the King's secrets, and I will. During that job, I was responsible for a huge number of elements that I'm really sorry that I can't talk about, but I can give you some proof points. And that's, while I was security minister in those 2 years, we arrested and charged more Russian and Chinese agents than in the previous decade. Conservative leadership matters.
You've got a young family. Do they mind what you're up to, what Dad's up to? You keep trying to be the leader of the Tory party. You tried in 2022, you're trying again?
Well, they mind the fact that I'm not at home, and my boy loves sword fighting, and he minds the fact that I'm not currently having a sword fight with him. With his swords, and my daughter minds the fact that I'm not always at her ballet recital. I know this is something we share, yes. Is the fact that our daughters are both very, very keen ballerinas. Yours rather more professionally than mine. Don't tell her I said that, please. But my daughter is only 7, so I think she can. Okay. But you know, of course they mind. But I'm very proud of them, and they're extremely supportive of me. And my wife is unbelievably generous in letting me come away for days like this and taking on the responsibility.
You mentioned your service, you know, obviously congratulations on your service, 2003-2013 in the British Army, Lieutenant Colonel, when you stopped doing that work. You served in Iraq and Afghanistan. What did you learn from that service about being a leader, about being maybe even Prime Minister?
Well, look, I mean, many people learned a lot of things in Westminster, and their experiences, of course, important. I learned what I know about leadership in combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I learnt it by working with one of the most impressive people I've ever had the privilege to serve, and that's General the Lord Richards, who was, at the time, he was Chief of the Defence Staff, I was his military assistant. We had the responsibility, or he had the responsibility, I had the responsibility of supporting him, of making sure that our operations around the world were delivering in order to protect the British people. And, you know, that sense of service, that sense of duty, that sense of protecting Britain from all threats is something that is absolutely at the core of who I am, because you've got to decide who you are and whose side you're on, and I have always been on the side of the British people. I've never wavered in my absolute commitment to keeping our country safe and keeping our people safe.
Okay. And just a quick question, were you a spy?
I was a uniformed intelligence officer.
Okay. So the internet says things about you.
The internet says many things.
You backed Liz Truss in 2022 to be leader. You regret that?
Look, I stood because I thought that I had the best answers to the challenges that we faced at the time. And I liked when I was knocked out, sadly, before you guys got a chance to vote, but there we go. I got the choice between two people, and one of them was talking about growth, and many of us were inspired by that message. We were disappointed by the failure to deliver.
Okay. And you're loyal? There's rumours that you were trying to be leader last year.
No.
No, you weren't doing any fundraising or any work behind the scenes. You're loyal to the leader. And
I have been absolutely clear that when I'm in a government, I serve that government.
If you don't get this time, you'll be as loyal as you have been in the past in the future. What's your conservatism? I mean, are you centre-left in this party? Are you a wet, to use that Thatcherite term?
This is one of those questions that really comes up using the language of the socialists that's used to divide us. They keep trying to describe us. They keep trying to describe your channel as right-wing, to try and disparage it, to try and knock it off, to try and pretend we shouldn't listen. But the truth is, we're not left or right. We're conservatives, and we all share. We all share conservative values, and the way we express them in different ways depends on our perspective. Now, you know, there was a time, only a few years ago, when I was asked to vote for a rise in national insurance contributions, a tax on working people. Now, that wasn't in the manifesto. I thought it was the wrong thing to do. I didn't support it. Does that make me left-wing or right-wing? There was a time, a few years before that, when I was asked We were all asked to vote for vaccine passports. I thought that was an attack on our liberty. I thought it was the wrong thing to do. I voted against it. Does that make sense?
If you win, what's your day one action? The first thing you do?
Well, look, let's be honest. The day one action is to reform the central party machinery. It isn't working. There have been... I don't know about you, but I was on doorsteps across England, and I have spoken to hundreds of people across the United Kingdom about how that election worked. And let's be honest, thousands of activists, hundreds of candidates put their absolute all into a campaign and were let down by others. It wasn't this party that failed. It wasn't the ideas that failed. It was the centre that failed. And we need to own that. And so from my perspective, let me just say to all of you, I'm sorry. The infighting in Westminster, the chaos in Westminster, and then the campaign, they all let you down. I'm sorry.
So how would we restore that trust that was broken at the election campaign?
Well, the reality is that we need to restore it through our actions, not just our words. We can say many fine things, but unless we're willing to take on the difficult decisions that make a difference, it won't matter at all. So what we need to do is we need to own the change in our party so that the country sees that we've changed and the country can trust us again. Because you and I both know that the truth is Conservative activists are the kind of people who do things. I'll bet you if I asked for a show of hands, I would find that almost everybody here has organised scout groups or Lions clubs or Rotarians or whatever it is. There's so many people who do so many important things in our community who are also Conservatives. And conservatism is part of their expression of effort and work and devotion to our country. And what we need to do is demonstrate that those people who you see in one light as pillars of the community are in another light the people who are championing the liberty and opportunity that your children and your family need to enjoy. So we need to rebuild that trust. From the centre, guess what that means? Trust the members, trust the associations, and empower them. Because this is your party, not the centre's, and your relationship let me be quite clear. The relationship between you and the central party should not be a begging email for 20 quid every 2 days.
You held one job in government, you're Security Minister 2022-2024, so you're the most inexperienced candidate. Is that a worry for these members?
I mean, look, I'm not going to hold against anybody their inexperience in combat or their inexperience in foreign affairs. You know, I won't hold against them the areas where they didn't serve our country and didn't put their lives on the line. They have served in other ways, and I think we should respect that.
They're different things, aren't they? I mean, serving your country in a battlefield is different to trying to get your own way in Whitehall. I mean,
Chris, look, I mean, the truth is they're going to have to own the record that they've earned.
We'll ask them about that. Okay.
And they're going to have to stand on their record. Okay. I'll stand on mine. Mine is 2 years keeping this country safe, introducing the National Security Act, arresting and charging more Russian and Chinese agents than the previous decade, and reforming areas of our intelligence and security services that I'm afraid I'm never going to tell you about.
On your record, though, you supported a manifesto that promised to cut net migration in 2015, 17, 19, 2024. What did you do to try and control migration? That was a massive promise issue which your party failed on.
So the reforms that I was making before we were somewhat rudely interrupted by the election was to bring together the intelligence networks that we could share publicly with other countries. Now that's slightly limited, but there are various areas that we could work together, and that I was working together with countries in around the world, and forgive me, I won't tell you where.
Illegal migration.
It's on illegal migration.
The big number is net migration.
The big number is net migration, and this is where we need to, you know, Secretaries of State need to own their record. I got deeply frustrated with this pledge that you and I constantly heard, and I made because I meant it, of the up to 100,000, and I've repeated. And then hear Secretaries of State going, yeah, no, I get that, but my department's an exception. My department's different. My department's not the same as the others. Oh, no, I get the cap, but not for me. Well, I'm afraid that's not how government works. You've got to actually mean it. And I'm afraid when Secretaries of State say, oh, yeah, but trade will suffer, but health will suffer, but foreign relations will suffer, but I won't get the builders into housing, well, that's not the answer. The answer's got to be that you've got to have a really serious grip of the economy and think about how the British system works. You've got to train people. You've got to inspire apprenticeships. You've got to put the cap on the degrees, not on the apprenticeships. You've got to make sure what you're actually doing is you're helping people to fill those spaces. That's what we need to do. That's my commitment, and that's what I'll be delivering as leader of the Conservative Party.
So you won't set a cap?
Chris, I have set a cap. But I'm going to set a legal cap at 100,000, and the reason I'm going to set it is to make sure I focus the minds not just of businesses who are going to need to change the way that they hire and train, but also to focus the mind of government, because let's be absolutely clear. The government itself has been employing many, many, many people who should have been trained at home. Now, I don't want to say anything ill about nurses who come from abroad. They're fantastic people, they're wonderful people, and we are honoured and privileged to have them with us. But the truth is we should be training our own nurses. We should be making sure... It
takes 6 years, it takes 7 years to train them.
So first of all, it takes time to train them. You've got to start now. When was the best time to plant a tree, Chris? It was 20 years ago. When's the second best time? Today. We need to start training nurses today. And that means we need to stop making nurses, force them down the degree route and inspire them down the apprenticeship route so that we can share. Is it right, Chris, that a nurse leaves a university with less experience, not her fault, but less experience hands-on in a hospital and a huge debt, when she could leave an apprenticeship with more hands-on experience and no debt? Isn't that the right answer?
Where are you on tax? Are you comfortable with record tax levels since the Second World War?
Hey, look, I'm the one who didn't support the last tax rises, so no, I'm not. We need to bring taxes down, and let's be clear.
What do you comfortable with taxes?
Let me be clear about tax. Tax is not... Raising and lowering tax is not an ideological point. We don't do it because we worship high or low taxes. It's because we believe in freedom. The reason we think taxes should be lower is because we think individuals are better when they are freer, when they're able to make the decisions over their own lives, when they're able to put their effort and their energy into the projects, into the ideas that they think will work. And do you know what? I'll tell you a secret, Chris. The lower you get tax in a balanced way with sound money, the greater you get growth. And the reason you do is because free people make better decisions than people who are controlled by the state.
So looking forward, how will you beat Labour in 2028 or 2029?
Do you hear what I just said about growth? Yeah. We need to get that going. But let's just listen to what Sir Keir Starmer said in Liverpool in the weeks gone by. He's actually specifically said that he believes in state control. He hasn't said it metaphorically, he hasn't even dressed it up, and to be fair to him, it's the one thing he's been absolutely honest about. He actually believes in state control. Now that is extraordinary, because we know where that leads. You know, I don't know about you, but I saw this movie before. Admittedly, I saw it in black and white, and it was on my parents' TV, and it was 1970, but I know where it leads. That's not the road to growth, that's the road to ruin. And that's where he's taking us.
But many think markets have failed, don't they? They just feel let down by the housing market and by other markets, and that's what he would say. The state has a role in that.
Well, the state has a role in lifting its foot off the throat of the market. That's how you empower freedom. That's how you get growth. That's how you get change. Because the truth is, what we've seen time and time and time again is that when Labour comes in, debt goes up, unemployment goes up, and we have to come in to clean it up.
Your big job for these people is to get them back into power. How do you do that? Is the enemy the Lib Dems or reform?
No, the enemy is trust. We have eroded trust in ourselves, and we need to rebuild trust in the Conservative Party. Because let's be honest, people didn't vote for that paddleboarder to become Prime Minister, and they didn't vote for Nigel either to become Prime Minister. They voted against us. People woke up in the morning and they wanted to get us out. And some people voted Lib Dem, some people voted Reform, most people stayed at home. We need to rebuild trust in the Conservative family and rebuild trust in British politics. And I'm standing because rebuilding trust and building trust is something that intelligence officers do every day. And offering leadership is what this country so desperately needs. Because the truth is, just look at the challenges we're facing. Do you want me to tell you about a rising China? Do you want me to point to you the evil of Iran or the danger of Russia? Do you want me to highlight the fact that we haven't got serious economic growth in this country in 30 years, meaning that we're seeing GDP inflated by migration, but not individual GDP going up?
Government.
Not just us, under Labour before it as well. And you're absolutely right. These are problems we need to fix. And that's why we need to be absolutely committed to growing the economy, to changing the way that this country works, so that we're delivering for people. And that means investing in Britain, believing in Britain, and leading this country to a better future.
Well, why not do a deal with Nigel Farage? The Reform was second in 98 seats to Labour. They are the best option in those seats. Why not do some kind of deal with Reform?
Look, my job is to reform the Conservative Party, not to become Reform. My job is to make sure we are... My job is to champion our values, to champion the Conservative voices around the United Kingdom. But too much of the last few years, we've been a Westminster club. Let's be honest, and when I've been on your podcast in the years gone by, the conversation is about Westminster and all about Westminster. But conservatism isn't just about Westminster. For me, conservatism is about unionism. It's about the whole country. It's about Scotland, Wales, England and Northern Ireland, and all parts of the UK. What we need to do is we need to turn the party around. That's why when I talk about unity, I don't just mean unity of 121 MPs. If you can't do that, frankly, get off the stage. I mean uniting the Conservative family. Because just look at the powerful voices we have in this country. Just look at the amazing, amazing leaders we have across England who are championing our voices and our values in county and borough and district halls all over the place. Just look at the voices we've got in the Welsh Senate. Look at the voices we've got in the Scottish Parliament. Look at the voices who, when we bring them together, could be that orchestra of conservative values, challenging this evil tide of socialism.
Not with the Farage as a member of the party, as your, Rishi Sunak said last year ago, it's a broad church. You didn't rule it out.
We are a broad church, but one of the principles of the party has got to be that you actually want it to succeed. He's told us he wants to destroy it.
Okay, Boris Johnson, all over the news this week, his book's out. Would he be a good member of your team in the Lords, the Foreign Secretary again?
Do you know what? I think Boris did some amazing things in office, and there's two things. Well, I've got the stage. I want to thank Boris publicly for two things that I am just immensely proud of as a Conservative and as a Brit. And the first is, he stepped up when nobody else would, to stand with Ukraine. That's heroism. He didn't do it alone. Ben Wallace was absolutely with him, and the two of them, I think we should all be deeply proud of both of them. But the second thing Boris did that I'm really impressed with, in that chaos of those first few weeks of COVID, when many people were running around like headless chickens, not quite knowing which way to go and what to do, Boris got together a task force led by somebody from the private sector, putting them in charge of civil servants, and delivered the fastest vaccine rollout in the world. That is impressive.
Would you allow him back in your government if you're your party, as a candidate in a by-election? I mean,
I've got to be honest, I'm not going to choose candidates for associations. It's something I think is deeply wrong. What I'm going to do is make sure you can choose your own candidates early.
And that includes Boris.
If Boris wants to stand and you want to select him, over to you.
Which Labour policy would you back?
Well, if they're honest about it, if they're actually honest about it, then some of the planning reform they're talking about is interesting. Now, let's be honest.
The Green Belt, is that the
No, this is where they're, I'm afraid, being dishonest. Because they've spoken, on one hand, and this is where you hear Angela Rayner, I'm going to bulldoze your fields and I'm going to take over your land without talking to you. Okay, I believe that, actually. I believe that she's planning it. And then on the other hand, you have Keir going, oh no, we're going to have local consultations and we'll make sure we listen to people. Well, if he's going to do planning reform with consultation and actually empowering communities, I'm with you. If you're going to do it like Angela Rayner, I'm against you. Make a choice.
Okay. No enforcement. That goes to the next question is, how do you bring down the average age of a Tory voter? 64 in July's election. I mean, that means it's kind of an old people's party half the time. All the support is mainly based in pensioner age people. Is it through the planning system that you can attract more young people?
Well, let's be absolutely clear. It's partly the way we talk about things, but it's also partly the policies we adopt. It's both tone and action. And that's where the leadership that I'm offering is already, you can see it, is inspiring young people to come out and support me, and I'm very, very proud to have many of their support. And I'm very, very proud that many people have reached out. In fact, I believe there was a poll by Savanta today saying I'm the person who's most likely to attract people back to voting Conservative if they're under, I think it was 35 was the age cut-off. Now look, this is really important, because this isn't actually about young versus old. That's how some people pitch it. I know you don't, Chris, but some people do. This is about bringing our country together, because, let's be honest, unionism isn't just about geography. It's not just about tying Edinburgh to London or making sure that Glasgow can work with Carlisle. It's about tying generations together, bringing this country together so that the energy and drive of the young is tied with the experience and assets of the old, and we actually get growth in this country. That's what makes us a country, that's what makes us a family, and that's why Conservative policies are the natural policies of this country.
How do you get the voice of these people heard more at the top level of the party? Do you want an elected chairman?
Well, this is really interesting. So I don't know how many of you have completed my survey who are in this room, but if you haven't, it's still live, and I would love to hear from you. We've already had several thousand, and I'm not going to tell you who it is, but 1 or 2 people from CCHQ have also completed it. So there's maybe a few inside gags there too. But look, I want to hear from you. But I want to make sure that we have all the voices of the Conservative Party represented inside the Conservative Party. So what do I want to see? I want to see the Chair of the National Convention, Julian, who many of you have recently elected, actually attending Shadow Cabinet so we can hear from him directly what members think. Now, we also need to make sure that we are conducting our own relations. I can see my chairman, Dennis, is in the front row, and he's a very good friend. I hope you're going to forgive me for doing this. But Dennis runs our Conservative Policy Forum in Tunbridge. And for me, it is incredibly important, because for me, it's the way I know that I'm in touch with the views of the people I represent. And as I say far too often, sorry, Dennis, but as I say far too often, I cannot represent you unless I know what you think. And so having that information, being in touch with the Conservative Policy Forum, making sure that the CPF has a direct link to Secretaries of Shadow Secretaries of State, that is essential to making sure our party listens to the members, draws from the members, draws the experience of members who are doctors and soldiers or business people or farmers or whatever they are, to make sure that we're getting that talent into the party.
On the Brexit referendum, you voted Remain. You voted Remain in the Brexit referendum. How will you defend that in the next election, when many think it could be an in-out could be on the debate at the election next time?
Well, I don't need to defend it. It's in the past. Ever since the decision was taken, I have supported the democratic will of the British people. Ever since it was taken. Well, let me be quite clear. The decision was in or out. We voted out. We're out. And that's why I rejected the single market. I rejected the customs union, because that wasn't the deal. The deal was clear. That's how the vote went, that's how I voted.
And you'll fight against any future getting closer to the EU with a deal on fish or when the TCA is renegotiated?
Well, there's going to be huge changes, but I am never going to allow our sovereignty to be compromised against the will of the British people.
Just quickly about the so-called culture wars. What's your view on wokery? Are we too woke? Why does the left attack our history so much?
Look, one of the problems with the word woke is that it's allowed people to say, oh, you know, you're bracketing it, you're pushing it into a certain area. Let's be clear, this isn't about woke or not woke, it's about being true or not true. It is not true to say that the United Kingdom is evil. It is not true to say that all our history is bad. It is not true to say that this is an evil country. Those are not true statements. I will always stand up for what is true. What is true is, I know, and I'm pretty sure you know, what a woman is.
What is one, Tom?
Do you need me to define it? If you want me to tell you that my daughter one day will grow up to be an adult human female like my wife, I very much hope that that is the only definition that we will need. But we need to be absolutely clear that when we stand for the truth, we also stand for tolerance. We also stand for liberty. We also stand for personal freedom. Because I am deeply proud of one other thing that a Conservative leader has done in recent years. I'm really proud of equal marriage. I'm really... And let me be clear, for those of you who don't know, I'm a practicing Roman Catholic. My religion defines me, it demands things of me. It doesn't demand anything at all of you. You're free to do whatever you want. But the same equality, the same freedom I ask for my own beliefs, I must give to yours. And I must respect them too.
We're running out of time on my questions, so I'll do some quick ones. Yes or no. ECHR withdrawal, are you in favour?
Opt out of the bits you can, reform the bits that aren't working, and if that doesn't work, be prepared to leave, yes.
Will you restore the winter fuel payment?
I would make sure that pensioners have dignity in old age. At the moment, I would never scrap it, but we need to make sure that in 4 years' time we're ready to treat pensioners with the dignity they deserve.
What does that mean? You restore it, you don't know?
I'm not going to be writing a budget for 4 years' time, I'm really sorry.
You sound like all the rest of them now, Tom.
Well, it's honest. If you want me to give you a glib answer and be dishonest with you, that's not what our members expect. Our members expect, quite rightly, the honesty of knowing that they can trust what I say. I'm going to offer you the leadership that is honest, and the honest leadership is I can't write a budget today for 4 years' time.
Would you scrap Labour's ban on new grammar schools?
Yes.
Would you abolish the top rate of income tax?
Again, I'm not going to be writing budgets.
In your view on the BBC, is the licence fee safe if you become leader?
Look, I'm really proud of one bit of the BBC and I'm really worried by another bit. What the BBC does globally is incredibly important for promoting human liberty and dignity. That I'm really proud of. What we're seeing sometimes on our own channels is quite concerning.
And just finally, are you a Yimby, Nimby or banana? Do you want a banana?
I don't know what a banana is.
Bananas build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything.
Well, that sounds disgusting and yellow. It must be a Lib Dem. I'm a believer that you've got to build the right things in the right places and you've got to bring people with you.
So, Yimby. Boris Johnson or David Cameron?
Oh, both, but they're very, very different people.
Boring.
Oh,
yes or no?
Boris for a night out, let's be honest.
Star or Blair?
Oh, God, neither. Dear God. Can you imagine having them both there, being preached at by one, being patronised by the other? God, it'd be torture.
Which Tory politician would make a great Bond villain?
Actually, Boris would.
And just finally, one for me. Will you recommission a new Royal Britannia?
Oh, I love the idea. I absolutely love the idea.
Now listen, we're out of time with my questions. Thank you, Tom Tugendhat, for that. So we've got 18 questions, 30 minutes, let's go. John from Bromsgrove, if you're here, John, do shout out. As leader of the opposition, what would be your top 5 priorities and goals, briefly?
Right, first priority, reform CCHQ and make it a battle-winning fighting machine again. Second, make sure we are ready for that next general election by organising ourselves on conservative principles with members first. Third, you ready?
Yes.
Choose candidates early, like now. Four, you know what's coming, don't you? Stop spamming members. And 5, our manifesto will be a conservative manifesto. It will be an honest manifesto that reorganises the economy to make sure it's delivering liberty and opportunity for all our people. That's what my focus will be.
Daniel from Barnet asked, how do you differentiate yourself from other candidates? Why are you better? I mean, you mentioned your military service, but elsewhere, outside, away from that.
Look, I've got a long record of delivery, and frankly, I'm not a believer. There's 2 great mayors who've demonstrated this, Ben Houchen and Andy Street, have demonstrated it's not ideology, it's delivery that people want. And as Conservatives, we are practical politicians. We're the people who get up in the morning and do things. And the way we do it is by just getting on with it, by just delivering. I deliver. I've delivered the National Security Act. I've delivered more arrests of foreign spies in our country. I've delivered security to our country, and I've delivered it on operations overseas, and I've stood up to dictators at home.
Yeah, okay. Katie from Sefton in Merseyside, regardless of who is selected as your party's leader, can these people have your assurance you'll get behind the new leader and you'll be working with them if you're selected?
Yes, no question about it.
Labour's first budget is going to be enormous on October the 30th. If you were leader, how would you respond to it?
So the first thing, and forgive me for doing this public, I would like to respond to it. This is going to be one of the most consequential budgets in our lifetime. This is going to be a budget that takes us back to the 1970s, not forward to the future. This is a budget that is going to destroy growth, destroy opportunity, and destroy hope for people. And don't just take my word for it. Look at what's happening right now. Go and talk to Wren Kitchens in Hull and ask them how many orders they've had in the last 3 months since Rachel Reeves warned them that it's all doom and gloom in October. Go and talk to people in the city and ask them how much business they're doing. Go and talk to financial advisors and accountants. They are all selling everything, cashing in everything, and moving everything abroad. This government is already destroying the economy. It is already doing damage to this country, and they barely even started.
I mean, they blame you for this, don't they? They say there's a £20 billion black hole. They're taking measures, withdrawing benefits from people to deal with the problems you created.
Well, look, don't take my word for it. Rachel Reeves herself told us in June, in the Financial Times, I know we all read it daily for its, particularly for the racing columns, she told us herself that there were no secrets, that there were no hidden columns, no hidden books, it's all public, it's all in the OBR. You know it's all there. So you can't claim there's a black hole. That's literally what she said. But now she sees more black holes than Mr. Spock.
Okay, just to be quite clear, if you become the leader, or the final 2 next week, will you go and see the party chairman and demand to have this contest end before the October 30th budget?
Look, I've already made my views plain in private. I made them public on Liam, I don't know whether Liam Halligan's here, but on Planet Normal about a week ago. And if you don't know where I stand, conference, please tell me now.
VAT on private schools from Rhoda from Congleton. She asked, imposing VAT on private education is the most unconservative thing to do. Would you, if you leader of the next government, abolish it?
Yes. Let's just be quite clear about this. This isn't just a bad policy. It's a vindictive and nasty policy. First of all, they're not waiting for the beginning of the school year to give parents and kids the chance to change if they need to. That's just plain mean. Secondly, they're not just making those who send their kids to private school pay, they're making everybody pay. Because whether you're going to have to pay the 20% extra, actually the business rate says more like 35, maybe even 40% extra, whether you're going to have to pay that, or whether you're just going to have larger class sizes, either way, Labour is making you pay. Now, here's the other thing. The truth is, this will make us a complete outlier. There is only one other country that charges any tax at all on education, and that's New Zealand, and they charge the same small rate of VAT on everything, including food. And if you think it's going to stop here, do we really think, do we honestly think that they're going to stop at education? Do we not think they're going to put VAT on medical care, on care homes? Do we not think that they're actually going to extend it wider and harsher? I think they are.
You went to a private school, I think St Paul's. Do you understand what others watching you will think you're pretty well off, pretty posh? Do you understand what they're going through? Does that hold you back in any sense?
Of course I do, and the reason I do is because I learnt about my country not from school, but from serving in combat in Iraq and Afghanistan. I lived with men and women, quite literally lived with them, in conditions that gave a certain feeling of intimacy. Well, when you're with Royal Marines, that's kind of what happens. Sorry, that's an in-forces joke. The reality is you learn about your country by listening. And as a leader, I will always listen. Because you can only serve people you understand. You can only serve if you listen. You can only serve if you understand what our community truly needs. And I was lucky enough to serve alongside some remarkable men and women. One of them, in fact, came from a very difficult background. His grandfather had put him in care when he was 2 or 3 years old. He'd been in care until he was 16 and a half. He was saved effectively by the Royal Marines and ended up having a fantastic career, ended up as a regimental sergeant major, and has now made himself quite a lot of money. Actually, he's done very well in private business, and congratulations and well done to him. Another guy I came from also came from a slightly different broken home. I mean, his start in life wasn't always easy. Certainly it was difficult, particularly when his parents divorced, but his grandmother took a large interest in him, and she was the queen, so she was able to care for him. Very active. And I served with people from all different backgrounds. But what I learned from all of them was what their families are like, what their homes are like, what their communities are like. And that's what matters, isn't it? Because it's not about us, it's not about ideology. It's about our country, our people, our communities, our friends, and let's be honest, mostly our families. That's the building block of our life, that's the building block of our conservative family, and that's the building block of our nation. And that's what I'm here to champion. And my leadership will start with our family, our conservative family, and most of all with my family and my 2 kids.
Just going back to planning, NIMBYism. William from Edinburgh says we need more housing. The main road, right. He is right. The main roadblock is NIMBYs. But your party relies heavily on votes from the demographic of people who maybe don't want building near them. How do you take them on? I mean, are you willing to take on NIMBYs in your own ranks, in your own party?
So you see, I don't accept that, actually. I don't accept that at all. The problem with the word NIMBY is it suggests something's negative. What's actually happening is, at the moment, the way planning works, is we're asking somebody to devalue their principal asset in order to benefit somebody else, and offering no compensation, no support, nothing to go with it. How's that fair? That's not fair. What we need to do is we need to change the planning system so that what we're doing is we're rewarding people for the efforts they're making for the communities they're taking.
But Section 106 exists. You can be forced to build a village hall or a roundabout.
There is the leader of Tunbridge and Malling Borough Council standing just over there, Matt Borton, the greatest council leader. Sorry, I shouldn't say this, but he's also my very dear friend. You asked your councillors about Section 106s, right? The money comes late, it never goes into the right thing, it just doesn't work. We need to reform this, because the truth is, actually, our people are very, very, very supportive of housing when it's delivering housing for their kids and their families, when it's delivering the kind of homes that people can live in, and not the kind of homes that are designed for foreign investment. They like it when what you're getting is you're getting not just a house, but a community. They support it when what you're getting is the investment that goes along with it, the roads, the buses, the clinics, the schools. That's when people support housing. What they don't like is the piecemeal profiteering that you get too often. What we need to do is change planning, so that you get housing and you get the kind of houses that people need to start their lives. Now, I can tell you where this is done well. It's been done really well on King's Hill, where you see a density, sorry Helen, it used to be in my patch, it's now in yours, where you see a density of housing that is not only beautiful, but because it's dense housing, actually has goods and services within the local community and can afford it. That is really good planning. That's what we need to see around the country.
On net zero, Ben from London says there's a growing scepticism about climate orthodoxy, that slowing and abandoning net zeros might be a vote winner. I mean, do you agree with this? Where are you on this target that your government set?
So what I find interesting about this is when people hear net zero, too many people forget the word net, and they just hear the word zero. And that's what Miliband is doing. I mean, if you can tell me any of the policies that Ed Miliband has got at the moment that are not going to destroy Britain, I'd be delighted to hear them. Every single project he's got is designed to make electricity and power more expensive, harder to get, and to make us more vulnerable to foreign dictators.
They cut bills, don't they?
It's complete rubbish. I mean, GB Energy, his project on GB Energy is utter rubbish. He's creating a public sector entity to compete against the private sector and to therefore make bills more expensive. It's completely insane. But then again, it is Miliband, so he thought.
Are we in a climate emergency? Do you accept that term?
I don't accept that term. What I think is that we need to make sure that we are getting energy independence and energy sovereignty back. And energy security is really important to this country. And that's why I'm really supportive of some of the work that I've just seen up on the old Redcar steel works, where Ben Houchin is looking to introduce a new net zero gas turbine. Now that's the sort of technology we need to be bringing in. You bring in the carbon gas from the North Sea, you pump back the carbon into the North Sea underground. That sort of carbon capture and storage that you see off the coast of Banff and Buchan, off the coast of Aberdeen, that's really impressive technology.
The 2050 target, you're happy with that. There's never been a vote in Parliament about it. There's never been a referendum, obviously, about it. I mean, there's no actual democratic wrapper around that number. And it's driving all the policy in government, a lot of policy.
What that policy needs to drive is a global change. And I see absolutely no justification for Miliband's policies of closing down businesses in the United Kingdom, only to ship those jobs to China, where they're made with coal power stations anyway. It's complete rubbish. And let me just add one thing. I'm sure many of you have been following the news about Tata Steel. Well, today they stopped production. This isn't just an energy problem, and it's not just a jobs in Wales problem. This is a security problem. They were making virgin steel, and if you want to make tanks and warships, if you want to make the kind of weaponry that we need to keep ourselves safe, to protect our allies in Ukraine, and to make sure we are defended against hostile enemies, then we need to make virgin steel in our country. This is a sovereign capability.
So you would keep it open if you were in charge now?
Well, what we're now seeing is Labour have left us exposed to buying virgin steel off who? China.
What would you do? Would you keep Port Talbot open?
We need to make sure that we have that capability here. Now, there are different solutions. There are various different options that we need to look at. But when you look at the forge masters in Sheffield and the way they have developed technology and the way they're making steel, you know that we need to keep that production at home.
Parvez from Bedford, he asks, every election he can remember has been one from the centre ground. What will you do to ensure that if you fight the next election for the centre and make this a one-term Labour government?
Well, look, he's absolutely right that what we've got to do is we've got to win votes back off everyone, everywhere. Yes, of course, we've got to win votes back off Reform, but we've also got to win votes back off the Liberal Democrats. We've also got to win those few who went Labour and, sadly, in Waverley, far too many, and in Shropshire who went Green. We need to make sure that we are winning people back. Most of all, actually, of course, winning people back who stayed home. And to do that, we need to be talking to the whole country. That's why we can talk about our special interest subjects if you like, but what really drives the conversations, what's actually going to get us heard, not just with ourselves, but with our friends and our families who didn't vote Conservative last time. It's by talking about education and healthcare. It's by talking about economics and talking about the opportunities that Labour is stealing off our children in order to pay to their union paymasters.
What will you do to empower local party associations and council groups? You mentioned putting the National Convention person in the shadow cabinet. What else? Well,
look, empowering my own association is nothing I've ever been responsible for doing, on the grounds that I had seen my president and my chairman in the front row, and they're very much in charge of our association. And I know that associations around the country have very different relationships with each other. What we need to do is make a system that actually empowers our whole community, because this family, this Conservative family, is at its absolute best when we're drawing off the talents and skills and strengths of all our members. So the first thing I'll do is make sure that you can select your candidate as early as possible, and so you will not have candidates imposed under me.
Chris from Truro and Falmouth, he says that our candidates who share their views on how to deal with Reform, the Reform Party. Do you favour collaboration, or how would you bring back disaffected members from Reform? I suppose it's a different way of talking.
Well, look, my view is we've got to be Conservatives again. The truth is, if we want to fight over 20% of the vote, we'll end up getting a share of 20% of the vote. That's not how we win. We win by getting 40% of the vote. We win by talking to the British people. We win by being Conservative. And let me be quite clear what that means. That means championing freedom. That means championing business. That means being incredibly supportive of families who are making the effort. I want to see families recognised in the tax code. I want to see opportunity encouraged. I want to see growth back in this country. That's how we win the next election.
You mentioned families and tax codes. Is that transferable tax allowance to married couples?
Well, it's very actually. I think it needs to be a bit more than that, actually. I think the reality is we need to recognise that families are the building block of our society. And as Conservatives, we should be deeply proud of that, because our job is to support families, not to define them. Yeah. It's not our job to tell you who to love. It's not my business who you decide to make your life with. It's my job to make sure that that unit, that stable unit, is supported in our society, because that's the building block.
System.
In the tax system.
Okay. Jane from Stratford-upon-Avon says, "Dear Fantastic Four." She calls it the Fantastic Four.
That's very sporty.
Is it time to think the unthinkable, says Jane, and bring in female-only shortlist for some seats, because only a quarter of your MPs now are women?
So let me be clear. The last election, the worst thing that happened in that election was the reduction in women representing us on the green benches, because that took us backwards. That was the wrong direction. What we need to say very clearly is that we want more women to stand. Now, the CWO and Women for Win do fantastic work in encouraging people to stand, but my job as your leader is to restore trust in people to come forward. And that means my job is also the recruiting sergeant into public life. So if I drop a shilling in your beer, or your white wine rosé, I'm asking you to stand. Because what we really need to see is we need to see more women standing, not just for Westminster, but for councils, for county, and of course for Senate.
Like
no, I won't. I won't, and I tell you why. I tell you why I won't do shortlists. Because somebody like Kemi is a fantastic, important and respected colleague of mine, and I will not diminish or belittle her by making it look as though she got there under any other reason than under her own merits.
Clive from Harrow wants to ask about morality issues. What principles undergird your thinking on moral issues? He lists free speech, religious freedom, assisted suicide, which maybe came up before Christmas, abortion. So perhaps the last two first, the easy ones.
So the easy one. Look, I've already said I'm a Roman Catholic. That's me. And it determines a lot of how I think about life. Of course it does, but it defines how I must live my life, not how you must live yours. So I am always open to listening to debates about moral arguments from the perspective of the government as opposed to from the perspective of me as an individual. Because we need to make sure what we're enabling in our country is, to use his other words, freedom. We need to be championing freedom. It is quite literally the building block of our society. If we don't have that, we have nothing. But my job is also to make sure that we support the most vulnerable. And that's why I'm deeply, deeply, deeply uncomfortable with this assisted dying. I have seen too many reports, including from countries with jurisdictions that I respect very greatly, like Canada, where I've seen reports through military friends about somebody with PTSD who, instead of getting access to the care that he required, was being suggested that actually care was never going to be available and would never help, and that actually he should choose an easier, and I quote, cheaper alternative. That is wrong, and I will never support it.
So, you'll vote against if it's a vote before the end of...
Look, I never say never because I need to read the bill, but I think it's immensely unlikely that I could support it.
Abortion laws, you'll leave as they are.
Indeed.
Okay. Just briefly on Brexit, Gordon from London says that all four of you candidates voted for Theresa May's disastrous deal, in his words. Why should members who voted for Brexit believe you'll pursue and defend our sovereignty?
We had a choice at that moment as to how to get through the turmoil and the hurdles that we were getting to. That was the first step. My job is always to deliver on the will of the British people, and the will was to leave. That was the first step. Boris got a better deal. We moved on. I support that deal. I voted for any deal that has come before us that would see Brexit happen, and I will always support the democratic will of the British people.
For a deal which didn't actually support sovereignty.
Well, it was the first step.
That's what you're saying.
It was the first step.
You regret voting for Theresa May's deal?
I think it was the first step.
You don't regret it?
I think it was the first step.
Okay.
We can go around this point again if you like.
you can decide what you may make of that audience. Now, Peter from Esher and Walton says, what should the Tory position be on the current war in the Middle East between Israel and the terrorist organisations of Hamas and Hezbollah, and how would you expose Labour's position on that? But what should your position be on that, first of all?
So, I had the great good fortune, I started off, for those of you who don't know, I started off as a journalist in Beirut in 97 to 99. And just forget Israel for a second. Just forget about Israel. Lebanese Hezbollah has murdered more Lebanese people than almost any other organisation in Lebanon's history. It is a tyrannical, vile, dictatorial group that is not only engaged in attacking democratic allies of ours, like Israel, but is also engaged in child trafficking and drug dealing. In fact, it's one of the world's biggest drug dealing networks, smuggling captagon on behalf of the Syrian regime around the region. It is a horrific organisation, and it is the proxy of the Iranian state. The Iranian regime is utterly, utterly vile, and they are using Lebanese Hezbollah to profit, not just in military terms, but also financially. If you think that we should be equivocal between a democratic state and the group that I've just described, you're wrong. We should never, ever, ever be neutral in the face of evil.
So Israel's response since October 7th last year has been proportionate throughout?
Look, I'm not going to go through the ins and outs of it, because as a soldier I can tell you that decisions that are taken need to be looked at very carefully, but are not always reported. I'm sorry, Chris, but they're not always reported exactly. Not to misreporting, but they're sometimes difficult to understand or difficult to explain. So I'm not going to second guess everything. But what I will say is that if somebody ever took 200 Brits hostage or fired missiles at the United Kingdom. I would not rest until that organisation was destroyed.
Now, William from Scotland asked about the war in Ukraine. You may be surprised by the question, but he says he understands the need to deter aggression from bad actors on the world stage, but he's concerned about the war in Ukraine and the costs that we're investing in it and whether it's worth it. Where are you on the war in Ukraine?
There is an illusion sometimes that you can opt out. There's a pretense that you can let the world pass you by, that you can choose not to stand up to the dictator today because, don't worry, he'll eat somebody else. Well, I'm sorry, that's just wrong. That is absolutely wrong. Let me be clear why I support Ukraine. I don't particularly support Ukraine. I support Britain. I put Britain first. I will always put Britain first. My job for the last 25 years has been, either with my life or my voice, to defend this country. And I will always defend this country. But to do it, I need to understand what makes us strong. And do you know what makes us strong? What makes us strong is the ability to stand alongside partners, the ability to stand with allies, the ability to push our borders further out so that we have strength and depth, we have strategic reach, and that ability to extend our decision time. Now, for us, NATO is the core of that. That's the absolute heart of that. But it's not alone. And what Ukraine is doing in standing up to Putin's Russia is absolutely inspirational. I am proud to stand with Ukraine, and I will always stand with Ukraine. And I don't know if you've heard, but a general went to see Putin the other day. We got this, I can't tell you how. A general went to see Putin the other day and said to him, you know, the war, it's not going so well. And he said, Putin said, well, what's going on? He said, well, we've lost 100,000 men. We've lost 6 divisions. We've lost several hundred tanks, several hundred airplanes. We've lost thousands of artillery cases. And he says, and NATO? Well, they haven't arrived yet.
I mean, just briefly on that, I mean, would you sanction the use of Storm Shadow missiles in Russia against Russians? That's the question at the moment the government's facing.
I find this a very odd question. If you are firing missiles at a hospital in Kramatorsk or Kiev, should the Ukrainians not have the ability to respond to where that missile is being fired from?
Launching into Russia.
We have been for years. Yes. Our ammunition has been used for years. This is Putin again, pretending to make a red line when none exists.
Briefly, Chloe from Brentworth on China. The current government calls China a threat. What would be your policy on China if you become the PM? And how would you deal with the infiltration and penetration of the Chinese Communist Party in our country?
So I have already been taking action against China. I called out China years ago when it was still being considered an ally. I was clear that we should never have Huawei in our electronic systems. I'm afraid it's one of the things I had to rebel on, but I'm still proud that I did. And I'm absolutely clear that what we really need to do is we need to stand up for our values around the world. China is a threat. The actions they're taking, the decisions they're making are undermining our security every single day. And we need to be clear that we stand up for ourselves. It's about defending British jobs, defending opportunity, and keeping Britain safe.
And just 2 quick questions from your members. Jay from Sutton says that you're out of Downing Street, but would you join him in Downing Pints? He says, to create a fairer tax on pubs, would you compete with Jay on your Downing abilities?
I'm afraid I quit drinking when I became security minister. I felt it probably was best not to get that phone call at 3 in the morning when you're a bit tipsy. But I'll certainly join you for a pint afterwards.
And S. Mitchell from London wants to test your practical skills. Can you mow in a straight line?
I can not only do that, I can change a nappy while doing an interview on Radio 4.
Well, there we are. Tom Tugendhat, thank you. Okay, everybody, our next contender. Please have a seat. Our next contender to be Tory leader. Are you all ready for her? Okay, please leave quickly. There's more space at the front. Okay, our next contender. You know who she is, don't you? Kemi Badenoch. Hello, Kemi.
Hello.
How's it going?
It's going well.
Okay. We'll come to what you're thinking in a minute. Why do you want to be Tory leader?
I want to be leader of our party because it means something very special to me, and I don't want to see it die. I think the result we had at the last election shows that we are at an existential point. There is a party to the right that is challenging us. People across the political spectrum don't know what we stand for. I think that I can help sell conservatism again. Confident conservatism. I am somebody who gets cut through. I am somebody who communicates our values, and I always start from first principles. I can do it, and that's where I want to be Tory leader.
What was the moment when you decided you could be Conservative leader?
It was after I actually stood in 2022, and I did much better than everybody expected. Quite often, people stand for leadership for different reasons. In 2022, I was very frustrated that the party was going in the wrong direction. I thought we were talking right and governing left. And what I thought would happen is I'll stand for leaders so I can give a speech, talk about what's wrong, and then one of the other camps will grab me as soon as I go out. And then I didn't go out. I kept staying on and on in different rounds. I didn't get grabbed in the end to be part of someone's team. But I got the message out. And I thought, well, if I can come forth and beat former chancellors, former home secretaries, I could probably win this contest. But I need to make sure that I'm doing it from first principles. And given everything that's happened over the last 5 years, I think we all know that it is time for renewal.
And your qualities, we've heard from Tom Tugendhat, his military history. He doesn't like to talk about it, but he does talk about it quite a bit. What qualities have you got to make you a good leader?
What qualities that I have that make me a good leader rather than just a great person? Okay. I would start off with honesty. A lot of people are not used to a politician who says it like it is. And that is what we need to do now in this age where everybody has a short attention span. You need people who can cut through very quickly and communicate our values clearly. I think I can do that. But I also work very well with teams. I'm not a loner. There's a reason why my campaign is called Renewal 2030 and not Kemi for Leader. I think for too long we have relied on one person's personality. Oh, this person can win. Let's go with the winner. And we've forgotten about everybody else. We are a party with a great tradition. Labour has the unions. They have BBC. They have charities. All we have is each other. So the campaign is called Renewal. That is the mission. And all of the people who worked with me, all the ministers who worked in the departments that I ran are supporting me. I get on well, I can build a great team, I start from first principles, I can cut through. Thank you.
And what do your family make of this? Are they ready? It does lift you into a different level in terms of scrutiny.
Yes, it depends on which family member. So my husband thinks this is fantastic. My mother does not understand why I am doing this. And then there are views across that spectrum. But it's very difficult for family because they see you portrayed as something very different from the person that they know. And it's the same for friends as well. And I have friends of mine calling saying, why are people saying this about you? This is not what you are like. And I tell them that this is what politics is about. Being a politician often means people writing your story for you. They write a narrative for you, and for those who are closest to you, they find it quite confusing. But it's very important that we make sure that we tell our own stories. As Conservatives, we've allowed too many people to tell us who we are. We've allowed too many people to portray us as the bad guys. Labour are in, everybody can see that they're the bad guys, we're the good guys.
And what's your version of conservatism? You're centrist, to the right of the party?
I think I have a conservatism that spans quite wide. I start with principles rather than trying to draw a line somewhere.
Yeah.
So personal responsibility, family, freedom, freedom of speech, free markets, freedom of association. They're things that we've stopped talking about. That's what my conservatism is. Some people define left or right based on Brexit for the last sort of 5, 10 years now, or 8 years. It's where you've been on the European spectrum that defines whether you're left or right, rather than the economy. I think we need to start from first principles. We need to have a proper debate in our party about how we deal with the coming decades. The world of the 1980s, or even the early 2000s, is gone. We are living in a very different world, and we need to adapt and renew, as we have always done, for this new age.
So why are you going to redefine what being a Tory is? That might worry some members.
Well, I don't think anybody here is against personal responsibility or family. It's not about redefining, it is about restating. We stop talking about principles and just talk about policy. Policy without principles does not attract people. There is not, you've got... Thank you. Our values are what attract people to us as a party. I am not redefining conservatism. I am bringing back authentic, confident conservatism. That is how we win.
What did you mean when you told me on my podcast that you became working class at McDonald's?
Oh, well, I worked at McDonald's when I was 16, but it wasn't working at McDonald's that made me working class. It was an example of how I had become working class. I wasn't working there as a weekend job or part-time. That was my job. I was going to college part-time. I went to an FE college. And I had left Nigeria, where I'd had a middle-class life, driven to school every day. And the first time I ever went on a bus was in this country. But I couldn't even afford bus money most of the time. I had to walk everywhere. Sometimes I was hungry. I was on my own. I had a place to live, but I had to do everything myself at a very young age. If that is not working class, I don't know what working class is. The working classes are the people who have to work for a living, otherwise they will be in trouble. They are people who don't necessarily have big savings or a family that can look after them. We need to stop trying to define ourselves. This is why I say I don't like identity politics. Oh, what's this person? Let's give them a label. Are they middle class? Are they working class? Are they this? Are they that? We keep each other in boxes, try and define everyone, and we stop listening to what they're saying. Let's listen to what everybody says. That's how we're going to get a proper debate, especially in this contest.
And how will it feel to be the first black leader of the party in this country?
I don't know. I haven't done it before. I'm sure it'll be interesting, but I am somebody who wants the colour of our skin to be no more significant than the colour of our hair or the colour of our eyes.
You mentioned your straight talking. Is that a problem? I mean, let's talk about maternity pay briefly.
Okay.
Briefly. In the past 24 hours, you've had to issue a tweet, a video, an interview with Sky News to explain what you meant on Times Radio. That's a busy day, isn't it? When you weren't meant to talk about maternity pay hours after that interview on Times Radio. And all the critics are going to be hearing is you're a Tory who wants to cut maternity pay. Are you?
No, I think maternity pay is quite important. And this was actually a long discussion we were having about the role of the state in deciding what businesses should do. But let's take a step back. Who remembers the phrase, "there is no such thing as society"? Yeah, everybody remembers. Mrs. Thatcher gave an interview to Woman's Own magazine where she was asked the question. She said there's no such thing as society. She was talking about people wanting government handout, that they're only individual people and families. And that very good explanation got cut down into a soundbite that was used to attack her. When you are a leader, when you are a conservative, when you are making the argument for conservative principles, your opponents are going to try and turn it into something else. We need to decide who's going to be leader of the party. Not the left, not the Guardian, not the BBC, just conservatives.
You did say it's excessive. You said the maternity pay varies depending on who you work for, and you said it's excessive.
I was answering a different question. I was interrupted as I was answering a different question.
Right.
And I don't actually think Kate McCann was trying to catch me out. I was trying to explain that when we start talking about micro-policy, we forget the first principles. Businesses, and I'll use an example. There's a cafe in my constituency that closed down. And the lady who owned it said, I can't afford to pay the wages anymore. I can't afford minimum wage. I can't afford for my staff to go on maternity. We are overburdening businesses. We are overburdening them with regulation, with tax. People aren't starting businesses anymore because they're too scared. The point I'm making is that if we lighten the burden on business, they will be able to help solve these problems rather than what Kate was asking me, should the government increase it, should the government do this or that? There is too much government already. Things aren't getting any better. Maybe we should try something else.
And people say you're quite blunt speaking privately, you know, you're brittle, can be a bit lose your temper easily. Is that an unfair characterisation of you?
Can you give me an example of when that's ever happened?
It's just people telling me stuff. I mean,
of course people will tell you stuff. People who don't want me to win the leadership are telling you these things. This is politics.
Is there a Stop Kemi campaign? You've gone towards that in some interviews, haven't you?
There's always a Stop Someone campaign. There will be a Stop Tom campaign, there will be a Stop James campaign, there will be a Stop Rob campaign, and of course there will be a Stop Kemi campaign. But as you can see, they are not stopping me.
Looking back on your record in the election in July, why do you think your government lost?
We lost for a whole host of reasons. There's a general fatigue that comes with being in government for a long time, and some people will just want change. There's nothing we could have done about that. But we made it worse. We could have lost and just lost, but we lost in a historic defeat. There are so many MPs or former MPs now that I'm seeing at conference, and I keep thinking to myself, I can't believe these people aren't here. And we have to make sure that this doesn't happen again. When we knocked on doors, we kept hearing all sorts of different things. Some people saying, you're too left-wing. Other people saying, you're too right-wing. Some saying you're too centrist. We were all over the place in terms of what we were doing. People didn't understand what we stood for. On top of that, we looked like we were squabbling amongst ourselves constantly. Nobody's going to vote for that. And that is why people voted whatever they could to kick us out. They voted Green, they voted Reform, they voted Lib Dem. We have a Labour government now that nobody really likes. They're making a whole hash of things. We need to renew ourselves, pick ourselves off the ground, and start doing what this country wants, which is being real conservatives.
How will your party restore the trust that it lost in that? Just by being real true to what you believe in?
We will need to do several things to get the trust back. We need to acknowledge where we made mistakes. There's no point just waiting for everybody to get sick and tired of Labour or saying, I told you so. We need to move on from where we left things by saying what we got wrong. If I'm elected leader, we will have a very rapid review process where members and MPs can feed in and we talk about what we got wrong, and we should acknowledge that to the public. But we also need to start speaking with more clarity and with more honesty. Quite often, when you see a politician on TV, there's just so much, waffle. Everybody's trying to, and I understand why lots of people speak in what I call officialese. And they speak in officialese because they're worried about the gotcha moment. They're worried about, what we had yesterday where people said, oh, did you mean this? Did you mean that? And so they just say safe, bland words, but there is a cost to that, and that is that people stop listening to you. We need to make sure that we get listened to, and that means speaking with clarity, and picking a leader who's going to be able to cut through and grab the attention of the public, especially as they're becoming more disillusioned with politics.
On migration, you supported a party on your manifesto to get it down in 2017, 2019, 2024 when you were a candidate. Is it time for an apology?
I think so. I think so. And I wrote an article in the Telegraph at the weekend about what we did wrong. That there are three things we need to do: look at the numbers, look at the culture, and look at leadership. And we sort of just made an announcement and then assumed that somebody else would be looking after it. And that's not right. This is not politics. If you just say words and hope it happens, that's witchcraft. That's not what we do. We have to make it happen.
Were you trying to stop it in government when you were...
I did as Trade Secretary with FTAs where there were mobility deals that I didn't think made sense. I certainly tried to stop them. There is a big difference with having a mobility scheme with a country like Switzerland or Australia, where the same numbers of people are moving back and forth. That's easy. When you have a mobility deal with a country that has 1 billion people, then it's quite skewed, especially if you don't have an equal number of people from here wanting to go there. We have to legislate and create policy that is in national interests, not just so we have an announcement for a particular day.
Yes. Will you cap it?
I think there will need to be a cap, but we also need to design a system that means the cap cannot be manipulated. So you won't hear me say, I promise to have a cap and it's going to be this number. It's very easy to create a cap. We saw this with the points migration system that people manipulate. If you have a cap and you have lots of the wrong people coming in, or worse, good people leaving our country. Good people leaving our country is great for net migration stats. Migration stats shouldn't just be about the numbers. It should be about who is coming in, who is leaving, why that is happening. Otherwise, we are talking to the letter, but not the spirit, of lowering immigration.
In your maiden speech, you described yourself as, to all intents and purposes, a first-generation immigrant. I mean, how do you feel being tough on migration now?
I think this is one of the most interesting things that happens when you tackle these tricky subjects. There are people who are constantly trying to police what you're saying. You know, how can you say this? How can you say that? This wouldn't have happened if those rules had been in place if you were in. But my job right now is to make sure that this country stays as great as it is. And that means we have to manage migration. The rules that were in place in 1980 are very different, don't make sense in 2024. The world is a different place. People have mobile phones now, they have GPS. You are able to have your feet in this country and your head and your heart elsewhere. That doesn't make sense, to have old laws in a new era. We need to keep adapting and updating our migration policy. And I want this country to be great for my children as well. We need to control it. We need to make sure that we are thinking about the next generation, not just who's going to wipe bottoms for us today. That's not good enough.
Just on Brexit, on the EU Retain Law Act, which was on your watch, your government said you'll axe 4,000 measures in January last year. Only 800 or not many went in the end.
Oh, we did axe 4,000, but there was a schedule that had 800 that were being removed in that piece of legislation. We removed others in other pieces of legislation.
Okay, because critics said you weren't being tough with the blob. I mean, I can't believe that, but they said that.
I'm always tough with the blob. Okay. But with one of the things that we need to make sure is that we make promises that we can keep. I think some people were angry that we didn't remove all of the EU regulations, but there are regulations on things like product safety, safety of toys. We don't want to remove those things. It's about keeping what you want and letting go of what you don't want. It's about the purpose of the law, not the provenance of the law. We have to be sensible when we're doing these things and not just use rhetoric. That's very, very important.